Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, FDA approved for over 20 years. So, talk to your specialist to see if Botox Cosmetic is right for you.
For full prescribing information, including boxed warning, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
Remember to ask for Botox Cosmetic by name. To see for yourself and learn more, visit BotoxCosmetic.com. That's BotoxCosmetic.com.
This episode is brought to you by Opel, the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Opel is FDA approved, full prescription strength and estrogen-free. Plus, there's no prescription needed. Finally, the days of needing a prescription for birth control are over. Opel is available online and at most major retailers. Take control of your health and reproductive journey with Opel. Birth control in your control. Use code BIRTHCONTROL for 25% off your first month of Opel at opel.com.
Welcome back to the MisFitNation. This, of course, is a continuation of our Roll with the Family episode. I apologize for the audio quality on the last episode. We're getting this thing straight as we go, tweaking the audio sounds, getting new equipment, make sure everything sounds right. However, if you hear something that doesn't sound right, it sounds a little hanky, send us a message either through Anchor, through the Facebook group, or on Facebook itself. If you have my number, give me a call. Let me know. All right, I want to thank Dr. Judy Staveley for joining the MisFitNation for a great conversation on the role of the family. She was able to share some great advice from her over 2 decades with the Air Force and Navy alongside her husband, Pete. Thanks again, Judy, for joining the MisFitNation, and we look forward to having you on again in the future. I'm sitting here again with a hot cup of Muertos Fill the Boot coffee. Go and check them out at muertoscoffeeco.com. That's MuertosCoffeeco.com. And find some great coffee to start your day with. And you can also donate to some great charities there. Now I'll do my best to introduce the next guest. She, for some reason, said yes to dance with me one night at Slicker's in Savannah, Georgia. This was 1993. I went home a week later, having only spoke to her once on the phone in my office after that. This was not either of us calling. It was her friend Juana. She did the private investigating to hunt me down and find me on Fort Stewart and get my company number. There was no internet back then, so she worked hard to get this info. I did get her number this time and carried it home with me. I called her from Jersey. My mother was looking at me in shock, like she did not know me at all. I hung up and asked her what was wrong. I kept the call short so the bill wouldn't be high. Yes, there was long-distance charges back then. She said, "What happened to you?" Puzzled, I said, "Nothing." She said, "You never call girls back. You're going to marry this one." My father was sitting there and laughed and said, "I guess you found your Southern belle." I laughed at both of them and said, "Yeah, right." Well, as the moon and stars aligned, we did get married just 5 months later. I guess moms do know a thing or 200 about their children. This past May, we celebrated 26 years married. Time truly zooms by when you're having fun. It, of course, was not always fun. The last 5 have been the most fun. That is because I was out of the Army. For the first 21, I was in the Army, 100%. Prior to 9/11, I was gone for months at a time for training. A year in Korea, a couple trips across the pond for deterrence, so I was not around. Then 9/11 happened, and I became ultra focused on training and war. In this period, she took the reins and raised our daughter. She took care of the house, the dogs, the cars, the bills. We lived 2 distinct and different lives most of the time. However, somehow it worked. When we got reunited, it was always new. It was like a reunion or something brand new. It was like the first night we met at the club. Coming back into the house after a long period, the adjustment is not easy. You learn tricks on how to make it better. I always knew I was not supposed to come in and take anything over, but deep down she wanted me to. Yes, I missed many birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays, but she made sure I had something on every one of those events while overseas. I know I could not have done it without her, and now I am present and making new memories as we move into this empty nest life together. So, without further ado, let's give Gwen a nice big Misfit Nation welcome and get her on here. All right, as promised, the Misfit Nation is back. This time we're back with my better half, my right hand for over 26 years, my wife, Gwen, who's been with me through multiple deployments, both to war and both operational. So how are you doing today, Gwen?
I'm doing good, Richie.
How was your day today?
I survived it.
That's good, good. So we'll get right into this to help you out. So we all know that in order to make a marriage work, there has to be equal effort from both people in the union. Marriage or any relationship is not easy to maneuver through. When you add the military into the equation, it becomes exponentially harder. How did you cope with the stress of being a military spouse?
I just want to first say that, remember, this is only me and my thoughts and opinions, and not for anyone else, and not to step on anybody's toes. But being that I feel that I'm somewhat a little of an old school spouse, um, Richie and I decided that we were married in for the long haul, and that when you make a commitment, you stick with it. And so, um, we always, once we had our daughter, she came first. So, one of the things about having her was that the reality is that the world don't stop because daddy's not home, whether it was training, school, deployments, or anything. She was always our priority. So, we always maintained to keep busy. Might have broken a few dishes along the way, because you're going to have those moments as a military spouse. And I was very cautious to pick friends wisely through this, as a military spouse. And I did it for 22 years. And so I could probably count on one hand the good friends that I've kept with me over the years that accepted me for all my faults and my entire family. So I think that's probably, it's hard, but you got to know what you're getting into before you say I do. So,
Do you think it was harder coming in as basically you were 18, 19 years old when you got married? So do you think it was harder being that young, or is it harder for anyone at any age?
I'm sure it was. I mean, that's forever ago. So who remembers when they're 18? I had a lot of growing up to do, I think. But I think, being married the first couple years, um, figuring out each other and things, and that's with you gone for the second year that we had time to do things, but we always made sure that we had time to do things.
So you're saying we made valuable efforts to take our time, choose our time wisely when we're together.
I think so. I think sometimes it's quality over quantity, and anybody in the military knows that. Depending on jobs, because we can go back and say, and this kind of goes into the next question, um, you were always gone before before 9/11. So the apart was always there for us. So that wasn't a new experience. So the quality was always what we made of it for each other, and having our daughter, and of course our little fur babies too. So, so we've had plenty of them.
Yes, we have. So, like you said, you had the honor of serving through peacetime, quote, and then during a prolonged war period. What tricks or habits did you utilize to make it through most of this? Really, 15 years of a prolonged war you were involved.
Like I said, I think you already being gone. I mean, our first anniversary gift was you going to Korea, and I didn't get to go. So you find out a lot of things that you didn't know about your spouse, and I mean, for the better half. But I think those times, and I call them hardship tours. I find it sometimes in being old school, People say, oh, they went somewhere for a month in a deployment. I don't call that a deployment. That's not, I think that's new terminology. I don't know if it's ever used correctly nowadays. So this is where things like this I don't want to offend anybody, but, you went a hardship tour. So we got 2 10-minute free phone calls a month. So we utilized the best that we could. I went back to school. And I kept busy. So I was a single mom for some part of it. Went to school. I worked full time. And I think one of those things is find an identity for yourself. I think sometimes spouses get so in tuned with them being a military spouse that they forget who they themselves are and any passion. And I think, though, I probably wouldn't have if Richie hadn't pushed me to go back to school. But after having my daughter, I realized, I couldn't just work a minimum wage job and, let my daughter see that. And that was all life could give her. So I went back to school to become a teacher. And I mean, even Lexi will tell you that she grew up on the Kansas State campus. I mean, I was always a mom first. Even when doing my things, wherever I went, Lexi went. And if Lexi couldn't go, then I didn't go. And I'm not saying that there were times, that she didn't, stay with friends while I did other things. But I think finding a groove for yourself. The biggest thing is if you're not putting on the uniform every day, then you are a spouse. You support your spouse in the jobs that he or she may do, but you find something for yourself. Don't forget about yourself and things that make you happy, because then when your spouse does come back, that's when a lot of issues and jealousy, I guess you could say, because I mean, I've went through that too. Like, he freely gets to go, even though it could be wherever, but I'm home cleaning the dog poop, washing dishes, taking care of his kid, mowing the grass, moving a house, whatever it may be. So sometimes, but in the end, if you find something for yourself, then that's what you identify with.
So not only did you keep yourself busy, you also kept Lexi busy through her years when she can remember, from probably, I guess, 4 or 5 years old on through the rest of her time while I was in the Army. So did that also help you by keeping her busy to keep you even more busy?
I think so. I mean, she played soccer, she did basketball, she did gymnastics, but she swam. And then we got her into running too. So she was always active. I mean, the saddest part for me though is, I mean, I played sports, but she played soccer for 12 years and I can't really tell you that much. I just know the ball's got to go in the goal and that she was a forward. But I was at every game. I only missed one game when we lived in Korea, and that was devastating for me because I had been to everything that there was. Mommy was there, so that was a little heartbreaking for me. But luckily, Dad was there. So, but yeah, keeping her busy was a good thing.
And that just happened to be the one game she scored multiple goals.
Of course.
Well, we told you all about it, so you were able to rejoice in it too when we had dinner that night.
Yes.
All right, so now, and when you started out, the family support group was kind of a thing then. But were there any veteran spouses in our, like, when we were at Fort Stewart and then back here at Fort Campbell, any veteran spouses that were able to give you good advice to help you?
This is where, for me, choose your friends wisely always came in my experience. I think when we were at Fort Stewart, when we first got married, we used to take our niece, Taylor, to all the events because we didn't have any kids. The commander and his wife were very nice.
Mrs. Anderson.
They didn't place rank on anybody and treated everybody pretty fairly and accepting of everyone. So that was nice. And then when we came to Fort Campbell, Donna and Doug Jones, I don't even think there's enough words to describe how wonderful these people were to us and to others. When there was, Saturday night, you knew where you were going. You were going to go to Donna and Doug's. They helped me through. They kind of had to wake me up because I was young, and when we came here to Fort Campbell, that's when I was pregnant with Lexi, and so they were my rock. You know, we had all kinds of incidences, and whatever it was, you could call on Donna, and she would be there, and her girls. They babysat Lexi, and you know we were a family. Um, FRG I think is still going, but that was not for me, and I think that's because some spouses tried to abuse the power or whatever it may be. So after that one incident here when Rich was gone to Kuwait for the first time, I don't think I've ever done anything with FRG again. But that's me personally. You can find some great people out there. It just was not a program that I really, because I didn't have time to sit around and gossip about who was doing what and anything. I had too much going on. But when we left here, you know, we still keep in touch. Unfortunately, Doug has passed several years ago, but we still see Donna and the girls whenever we can. We talk with them on Facebook or see them whenever. And then we go to Fort Riley. That was quite interesting. But I have to say about Fort Riley, that's probably outside of Doug and Donna, where I met the bestest of friends that I still have today that I keep on that hand. Sue and Tim Peterson, little Tim. Little Tim was always like a big brother to Lexi. Wendy Winston was my sidekick. I still have contact with her, even though we haven't seen each other in years. I'm sure if I, you know, whenever I make a message, and then my best friend, Andrea. And then, of course, all my other friends that I've had, you know, my childhood friends who married military, Natalie and Jason, Juana, unfortunately, who's passed away. But, I mean, you make a solid connection, and you keep them friends. So, usually they come when you least expect it, because Sue was actually one of the daycare providers in Lexi's class, and we moved across the street. I felt so bad for her having to see Lexi all the time, but she became like a second mom to Lexi. So I think, again, just picking people wisely.
And that was kind of when we first started out dating. All of your core group of friends were also dating military, and we all wound up getting married.
All in the same time frame.
Basically, we all stayed together. Juana would have still been together if she didn't pass. So that kind of helped you a little bit too, to reach back to them, see what they were going through, and see what advice they had, or you can give them advice as well. So now, speaking of advice, if you can sit with a young spouse or a group of new military spouses today, what advice would you give them as they start that same journey you did so many years ago?
I think this is hard. I'm so, you know, being out of it for a while, I think the biggest thing is be yourself. Don't go change for anybody or anything. Stay grounded. As your spouse moves up in rank, don't use that for somehow your benefit. It turns people off, and eventually it'll turn you off from the military. Their rank is their rank, and you are there to support them and others. Do your duties come? Sure. I mean, but just remember, the whole goal is to help your spouse and their soldiers. I mean, do that. But the big thing is be yourself. Find what you love to do. Listen to those who's been around for a while. I would say there's so many programs out there now that never existed when I started out on this journey. Like I said, when Rich was in Korea, 2 10-minute phone calls, and snail mail. That was the only way that you know, we were going to have any contact. I have all the letters from all the deployments that we ever wrote back to each other. Shoebox is full. Avoid social media. The best. One of the things to tell spouse, and I hear this all the time, like, if your spouse is gone, wherever it may be, it's not to be talking out in public about. That's kind of like a pet peeve of mine. It's just, you don't necessarily have to tell everybody in the world that you're a military spouse. You wear it, sometimes it's better to wear that badge a little privately than it is openly, because now, because of social media, and things that you put out there, people are watching all the time. They're watching you here, they're watching your spouse overseas. So, you know, just keep yourself busy, find what you love, um, know what you're doing before you say I do. I mean, I know this is for military spouses, but there's girlfriends, and I know of a lot of situations over the years where they ran off and got married before the deployment because the money was going to be good, and then 6 months later they end up divorced or whatever. Can you handle being alone? Can you handle being alone with 5 kids, crying and all of that? If you have a good support network, that's one thing, but remember, it's a commitment. It's a long haul. So think before you jump in.
That's solid advice right there. And I know you said support the soldiers, and through every one of my trips over the pond, my soldiers were taken care of a lot better than the other soldiers. As you would make care packages, not just for me, but individual bags for each one of them for holidays, treats for them for Christmas, Easter, Halloween, whatever. Well, pretty much every holiday I was gone. And I know they all appreciate it. And if you talk to any of them now, they'll ask, how's Miss Gwen? How's Miss Gwen? And of course, Mr. Chuck calls you OG now. So you're like the OG of the spouse group. And the Misfit Nation thanks you for everything you've done for them. And of course, I thank you for everything you did for me.
My pleasure.
Any parting words for the fans?
Good luck.
Thanks again to Gwen for coming on. And this is the Misfit Nation. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Gwen, again, that was great. I know this is not something you enjoy, but you rocked it, and I love you. Hopefully we can get you back on in the future to talk to other guests and share your insights, maybe in a one-on-one forum with them. For now, let's get back to this segment of the Misfit Nation. Alright, so I discussed my wife, but most military families don't just include the wife or husband, they include the children. The children are the ones who deal with more of it on a different scale. I retired in 2015. In 2016, my daughter wrote a piece for the Platform magazine titled The Army Brat Life. I've kept this article with me since then because it shows me the things I missed, my shortcomings, and where I could have been a better person, a better father for her as she grew up. And I'm going to read it to you verbatim. So here we go. Growing up an Army brat isn't what it seems. The public doesn't know the truth. They believe they do, but what they see is misleading. It's not just not having a home, and if your loved one is coming back. For me, it was calling the world my home, instead of a specific spot on a map. It was having a part-time single mom. It was not having as many memories of my dad as the other kids growing up. It was being alone in a world where you were afraid to get close to anyone because there were always the inevitable goodbyes. I was one of the lucky Army brats. I didn't move a lot, and I was lucky to have parents who were willing to sacrifice living together so I could finally settle somewhere to finish a school. However, living in a place for a long time only hurt me. I lived in Kansas for 8 long years, and because of this, I naively forgot one day I would have to say goodbye and leave the only place I had ever really called home. After 8 years of staying in one spot, I finally added to my list of homes. I moved to Alabama for a year, South Korea for 2, and then back to Tennessee where I was born. I got to see what different kinds of education systems and culture right at home. Most importantly, I became a global citizen. Living in South Korea opened the doors to a world I didn't understand. I adjusted to a culture that wasn't my own and even learned how to bargain in marketplaces in a foreign tongue. And for the first time, my family got to actually travel for fun. We traveled to Thailand and China while we lived overseas, getting to witness even more culturally diverse places. Being an Army brat gave me opportunities other kids could only dream of. However, being an Army brat also made me feel like I only had one parent. My dad was home here and there, but sometimes it felt short-lived, and eventually he would disappear again. The earliest memory I have of my dad being gone was after 9/11, when he was in Kuwait. However, that memory is only of hearing his voice through a recorded message in a brightly colored card. I mean, yeah, he was my dad and I loved him to death. But I was barely 5 and only knew of the idea of him. I was too young to understand, for he was a face in pictures. My mom went to college, taught high school, took me to soccer and gymnastics, and so much more, all by herself. My dad, like other soldiers, were deployed multiple times, so life with just my mom and the dogs for a year at a time was normal. He was in Iraq setting up plans with toy soldiers we'd send him, while we were at home eating dinner next to an empty seat. And unlike now, the phone calls and letters were far and few in between. Luckily, though, he didn't deploy again until I was older. However, he still missed a lot. He missed my 1st, 2nd, 4th, 8th, most of my 9th, and some of my 10th grade. Then we lived apart, making me lucky enough to have him move back to see me go to prom and walk the stage of my graduation. Out of all my soccer games in high school, I only remember him being at one of my tournaments and only a couple cross-country meets. He wasn't there when I needed him to push me to keep going. He missed moments I wanted him to be there, moments I knew he wanted to be there for. Not because of war, but because different stationing and states in between. Mom was there for every moment. When I looked to see who was watching me as I played sports, I really only saw her. My dad didn't get to see my first goal or my second. He never got to see me walk the balance beam or do a handstand. He wasn't there the first and only time I got all A's in school. He wasn't even there to laugh at me when I got stuck in a pile of snow. And it hurt me. It hurt a lot. Sometimes I can't even remember if he was really part of a memory or not. All I know is that I missed him every minute he was gone. I remember he was there for sad times. He was there when Nanny died, Grandma Jean, Uncle Mickey. He was even there to bury my beloved turtle Giant in the middle of a snowstorm. However, there are less happy times that I can't recall. I have the faded memory of him coaching me in sports and calling him to tell him great news. He was at home when I found out my first book was going to be published, right out of high school. War called him away, making him miss the good things. It took him away and changed him. It created a life where we had to constantly get used to living together as a whole family over and over again. Growing up an Army brat teaches you sacrifice in a world that lacks it. Even when the Army took him away, I knew deep down my dad would always come back. He was a fighter and will always be a great leader. And now that I am part of the retired Army brat life, I'm happy to say he'll be there for more. He'll be able to create way more memories than he did when I was growing up, and more importantly, he won't miss out. That's from the mind of a child. I hope you enjoyed it. All right. That was a great episode. Great advice from Gwen. And I hope you enjoyed Lexi's piece on the life of the Army brat. You can find that in Platform Magazine online, and you can subscribe to the magazine. As always, thanks for taking some of your time to spend with us on the Misfit Nation. Till the next time, as always, be humble, stay hungry, and keep hustling. We are the Misfit Nation.